Have you ever stopped to think about the power that words have? They can build bridges or erect walls, save lives or cause deep wounds. In today's video, we'll delve into how the tongue can be a powerful weapon of life or even death. If you value the power of words and want to understand how to use them to transform your life and the lives of those around you, stay with me until the end. Before you start, leave your like to help the channel grow. Subscribe so you don't miss any content that will transform your way of communicating. And share this video with that person who needs to hear this message today. Are you ready to join us on this journey? Well, let's go. The power of words. Between life and death, words have immense and often underestimated power. When the Bible says that life and death are in the power of the tongue, it is revealing a profound truth. The way we express ourselves can build or destroy, heal or hurt, bring people together or drive them apart. What we say has a direct impact on the lives of those around us. An encouraging word can lift someone from discouragement, just as a cruel criticism can plunge someone into depression. The sound of our voice can be a bomb or a poison. In family environments, for example, the constant use of encouraging words strengthens bonds and promotes emotional growth. On the other hand, aggressive or negative words, repeated frequently, generate traumas that last a lifetime. In friendships and relationships, communication is essential. A sincere compliment can transform someone's day. An apology can restore a broken connection. The choice of each word can decide whether to keep or lose. In the professional environment, the language used between colleagues or between leaders and subordinates has a direct influence on productivity, the organizational climate, and even the mental health of those involved. Words of appreciation generate engagement. Harsh words, resistance, and fear. In society as a whole, public speeches shape opinions and actions. Political, religious, and cultural leaders have great responsibility for what they say, because their words echo in crowds and can generate peace or incite hatred. It is important to understand that the power of language lies not only in what is said directly, but also in the way it is said. The tone of voice, intention, and context can amplify or minimize the effects of words. The internet and social media have further enhanced the reach of words. A malicious comment or fake news shared on impulse can ruin reputations, cause suffering, and even lead someone to take their own life. On the other hand, positive messages, videos of emotional support and awareness campaigns show how the spoken or written word can also save lives, promoting self-esteem, hope, and solidarity. In spiritual contexts, words are often associated with creation and transformation. In many religions, the word has a sacred character. In Christianity, for example, in the beginning was the word, reinforcing the idea of the divine power of language. Even within ourselves, the way we speak to ourselves has consequences. Internal dialogue. What we say mentally about ourselves can boost our self-confidence or sink us into Language is a tool for connection, but also for destruction when used irresponsibly. Therefore, it is necessary to develop awareness about what we say, how we say it, and why we say it. Emotional education should include learning about the conscious use of language, teaching from an early age that words hurt, heal, and have weight prepares individuals for a more empathetic and respectful coexistence. Empathy begins with listening, but also with careful speech. Telling the truth does not have to be cruel. Giving feedback does not have to be humiliating. Correcting does not have to be offensive. There is wisdom in knowing how to use language to build and not destroy. In view of this, it is up to each of us to reflect. Have my words generated life or death? What marks do I leave on others with what I say? Recognizing the power of language is the first step to using it responsibly. lovingly and consciously. Language as a tool for construction or destruction. Language is one of humanity's greatest gifts. Through it, we are able to express emotions, articulate ideas, establish connections, and influence realities. However, this gift comes with a responsibility: the conscious use of words. Many people do not realize that the way they communicate can strengthen or weaken those they live with. Phrases spoken in the heat of a moment, without filter or empathy, can cause deep and lasting damage. On the other hand, a word spoken with sensitivity and positive intention has the power to transform an adverse situation. Verbal support can be the first step in rebuilding the self-esteem of someone who has been hurt by life. In moments of emotional crisis, words act as an antidote or as poison. An empathetic conversation can prevent a tragedy, while mockery or judgment can push a person even further into the abyss. In homes where communication is violent, language contributes to cycles of pain and repetition of trauma. Children who grow up hearing insults tend to internalize these words as absolute truths about themselves. In addition, in abusive relationships, verbal manipulation is a powerful weapon. Words are used to control, belittle, confuse, and isolate. This type of language does not leave physical scars, but it hurts as deeply as physical violence. In educational institutions, the way teachers communicate with students can stimulate a love of learning or trigger fear and insecurity. A sincere compliment can spark a spark of self-confidence in a child. The same is true for leaders. Bosses who know how to motivate with words build strong and resilient teams. Those who only criticize, belittle, or mock contribute to toxic and unproductive environments. Language, therefore, is more than a means of communication. It is an act of creation. With it, we build realities. Words shape cultures, behaviors, and beliefs. What is repeated verbally tends to become social truth. The media, as a great propagator of speech, has immense influence. Hate speech, for example, is born from words that feed prejudice. Educational campaigns and messages of peace contribute to the construction of a more just society. On a personal level, words of affirmation have a powerful impact. People who cultivate the habit of saying positive things about themselves tend to develop greater confidence and courage to face challenges. This is why many therapists use techniques such as and the conscious use of language in cognitive restructuring. Changing internal vocabulary is an essential part of the healing process. Understanding the scope of language is understanding that each word spoken is like a seed. It can bear fruit of life or destruction. Once spoken, the word cannot be taken back, so wisdom is needed before speaking. Taking care of language is a daily exercise in empathy, self-control, and responsibility. Knowing how to listen before responding, thinking before judging, and considering before criticizing are attitudes that avoid unnecessary conflicts and pain. In short, language is a tool that can be used to lift or tear down. It is up to each person to choose its use with awareness and purpose, always remembering that every word has a destiny and an impact, for good or for bad. Words that heal. The therapeutic power of language. Few people truly understand the healing power that resides in words. In many moments of pain and confusion, the simple act of hearing something welcoming, kind, and respectful can be the key to emotional transformation. The language used in therapeutic environments is proof of this. Psychologists, therapists, and counselors use words as their main working tool. Empathetic listening and sensitive feedback are capable of bringing relief and mental clarity. There are cases in which a single conversation changes the course of someone's life, not because it was spectacular, but because, at that moment, the person heard exactly what they needed to rediscover their own strength. Words work like bridges. When chosen well, they bring the other person closer to themselves and to what they are feeling. Verbal clarity helps with emotional organization and allows difficult feelings to be named and understood. That is why there is so much value in validating the other person's feelings with words, like "I understand," "I'm with you," "that makes sense." These expressions, even if simple, make room for the other person to exist with emotional dignity. In the field of medicine, doctors and nurses who communicate with humanity help in the healing process. Patients who feel listened to and respected respond better to treatment and trust their caregivers more. In grief, language is essential. Knowing what to say to someone who has lost someone is an act of love. Avoiding cold and opting for presence and listening can alleviate intense pain and avoid resentment. Spirituality also recognizes the value of words in healing. Prayers, mantras, and chants have the power to comfort the soul, calm the heart, and renew hope. Even without scientific explanations, the positive effect is real. Self-help and coaching work with positive affirmations as a way to reprogram the mind. Phrases like "I am capable," "I deserve it," "I trust myself" may seem simple, but when repeated with conviction, they produce significant changes. In loving relationships, words of affection, sustained intimacy, a sincere "I love you" has more power than any gift. Telling the other person that they are important, desired, and valued nourishes the bond daily. Even when there is conflict, the choice of words defines the course of the situation. Expressing yourself firmly without aggression, saying what you feel without accusing the other person, are attitudes that avoid unnecessary hurts. In childhood, the words that a child hears shape their identity. Children who are praised for their effort and courage tend to become more confident adults. Those who hear devaluing words carry deep scars. Language is also a path to reconciliation. Knowing how to ask for forgiveness truthfully and acknowledging a mistake with humility are gestures that heal old wounds. Forgiveness often begins with a simple but powerful phrase. Taking care of the words we offer to the world also means taking care of our own emotional health. By cultivating more compassionate speech, we tend to attract more welcoming environments, deeper relationships, and a lighter life. Therefore, instead of using our tongue as an instrument of judgment and destructive criticism, we can choose to use it as a bridge of healing. Each word is a seed. May we sow healing, affection, and truth wherever we speak. Words that hurt. The invisible scars of language. Although they do not leave visible marks, words have the power to cause deep and lasting wounds. Insults, humiliations, sarcasm, and malicious judgments are forms of verbal violence that directly affect the emotional health of those who receive them. Society often downplays the suffering caused by offensive words. Phrases like "it was just a joke" or "you re-exaggerating" serve to discredit the other person's pain and perpetuate the cycle of aggression. This type of verbal violence is common in many contexts. Within families, at school, in the workplace, and even among friends. In all of these places, misused words create cracks in bonds. Childhood is a particularly sensitive time for this type of aggression. Children who grow up hearing phrases like "you re-useless" or "you re-a problem" internalize these messages and carry them as personal truths. At school, verbal bullying is one of the biggest villains. Derogatory nicknames, mockery, and verbal exclusion cause serious damage to some, generating trauma that can stay with the person throughout their adult life. In the professional environment, derogatory words from superiors or colleagues affect motivation and psychological well-being. Destructive criticism, irony, or sarcastic comments erode the employee's In romantic relationships, aggressive or passive-aggressive language is often mistaken for sincerity or strong temperament. However, when there is a constant use of words that diminish the other person, it is emotional abuse. Even in traffic, in lines, or in quick everyday interactions, the thoughtless use of words can trigger conflicts. Aggressive words, spoken on impulse, create environments of tension and hostility. Violent communication is not limited to what is said, but also to what is suggested with intonation, sarcasm, or judgmental silence. All of this communicates disrespect and can deeply hurt. In addition to causing emotional suffering, hurtful words can influence self-destructive behaviors. People who constantly hear that they are useless or unwanted often develop depression or anxiety. Studies show that frequent victims of verbal violence are more likely to become socially isolated, have low self-esteem, and develop psychosomatic illnesses. The body feels the impact of what the soul hears. The most worrying thing is that many of these verbal wounds are not recognized by either the aggressor or the aggressor. The normalization of verbal violence makes it difficult to identify the damage it causes. Changing this scenario requires awareness and re-education. It is necessary to understand that negative words, even if said without the intention of hurting, have real consequences in the life of the other person. Empathy should be the basis of language. Putting yourself in the other person's shoes before speaking can prevent a lot of pain. Communication should be guided by respect, even in moments of disagreement. Just as words build, they also destroy, and the scars caused by offensive words can take longer to heal than physical wounds. Speaking responsibly is a human duty. The tongue can be a sword or a bridge. The choice is ours. The word in the family environment. Formation or fragmentation. The family environment is the first space where we learn to communicate, where language shapes not only vocabulary, but also the vision we have of ourselves and others. In this context, words take on a formative or destructive role. Words spoken by parents and guardians during childhood have immense weight. Phrases like, "You are amazing," or "I believe in you," become emotional anchors for life. The opposite is also true. Constant insults and criticism create lasting insecurity. The way adults speak to each other in front of children teaches more than any sermon. The tone of voice, mutual respect, and patience in everyday conversations teach, in practice, how to deal with conflicts in a healthy way. In families where communication is marked by shouting, irony, punitive silences, or verbal outbursts, bonds become fragile and tense. Words cease to be instruments of affection and become weapons of war. Loving language in the home is an emotional protection factor. Children who grow up in homes where people speak tenderly develop greater self-confidence, emotional intelligence, and ease in relating to others. On the other hand, the lack of dialogue is also harmful. Silence between parents and children, or between spouses, can be as painful as aggressive words. Lack of communication creates distance, resentment, and mistaken assumptions. Family conflicts, which are inevitable in any relationship, need to be mediated by words that build bridges, not walls. Knowing how to apologize, express feelings, and listen attentively are gestures that maintain family unity. Language also transmits family values. Recurring phrases such as "here," "we help each other," or "we respect each other" reinforce the sense of belonging and collective responsibility within the home. Moments of correction and discipline also require attention to words. Correcting without humiliating is an art that demands a balance between firmness and affection. Criticism should focus on the child's behavior, never on their identity. Words spoken in situations of pain or family crisis also have a profound impact. Knowing what to say when faced with a loss, disappointment, or failure is a sign of emotional maturity. Many family conflicts are perpetuated by misinterpreted or misplaced phrases. Therefore, it is essential to seek clarity and empathy in communication. Asking questions and listening before judging or reacting. Words have the power to restore. "And I forgive you," "I love you," or even a simple "let us try again" can completely change the course of a relationship that was wearing thin. When a family member learns to use language well, he or she can be an agent of transformation in that family. Peaceful, sensible, and respectful speech has the power to positively affect others. It is important to remember that family language is not limited to verbal communication. The tone of voice, gestures, facial expressions, and looks also communicate, and often more powerfully than the words spoken. In short, language in the family environment can be a source of affection, unity, and development, or a minefield of resentment and pain. What we choose to say and how we say it builds the emotional foundations of those who live with us. The influence of language on social and political discourse. Communication in the social and political sphere is fundamental for forming opinions and conducting collective decisions. The way speeches are crafted can mobilize masses or sow deep divisions in society. Political leaders and public figures have enormous potential to influence when they choose their words. Their statements can inspire hope, unite different groups, or, on the other hand, foment hatred and intolerance. Election campaigns often use language strategies to attract voters. Impactful slogans and simple yet meaningful messages can transform complex debates into accessible and sometimes polarizing narratives. The media also plays a decisive role as they amplify political and social discourses. The way in which news is conveyed or interpreted can change public perception, directly influencing social decisions and behaviors. On the international scene, speeches by world leaders can be decisive for the global political climate. A well-structured statement can ease tensions, while careless words can trigger diplomatic conflicts. Persuasive rhetoric is a tool widely used by orators. By using metaphors, analogies, and repetition, it is possible to create a message that resonates deeply in hearts and minds, often going beyond reason. However, the same rhetoric can be perverted to manipulate opinion. When words are used in a distorted way, there is a risk of misleading the public, creating a false sense of unity or urgency that can lead to hasty actions. Public debate is enriched by the diversity of opinions, but it can also be harmed by speeches that incite hostility. Words that defame or discredit political opponents, undermine democratic dialogue, and encourage polarization. In social movements, words are weapons of transformation. Phrases of resistance and the fight for social justice can encourage individuals to mobilize against inequalities and build a more inclusive society. However, when language is used to divide and discriminate, the impact can be devastating. Messages of hate and prejudice fuel conflicts and worsen social crises, demonstrating the destructive side of irresponsible speech. Freedom of expression is a fundamental right, but it comes with the responsibility not to spread false or misleading information. The search for ethical and constructive discourse is essential to strengthening democracy. Critical education and access to quality information are ways for the population to learn to filter and interpret the various discourses that circulate in society. This ability to discern is a defense against verbal manipulation. In times of crisis, such as during a pandemic or social conflicts, words become even more powerful. Messages of guidance, solidarity, and hope can save lives, while misinformation can compromise collective health. Therefore, the responsibility of all social actors in choosing and disseminating words cannot be underestimated. Each statement has the potential to influence not only individual opinion, but also the course of an entire nation. In short, social and political discourse clearly reveals how language can be both an instrument of life, promoting unity and progress, and of death, spreading conflict and misinformation. It is up to society to cultivate ethical and conscious communication in order to build a fairer future. The impact of words on self-image and personal identity. From the earliest years of life, the way we are treated and described by the people around us shapes the way we see ourselves. The language directed at us becomes a psychological mirror, reflecting and shaping our identity. Words like "you are smart," "you are important," or "you have value" build internal pillars of self-confidence. When said sincerely and frequently, these statements become part of our internal discourse. The problem arises when, instead of positive affirmations, we hear destructive criticism, irony, and constant humiliation. Terms like stupid, incapable, or ugly become deep wounds in our emotional identity. These negative words, even when said in jest, can be internalized. Many people carry traumas that originated in seemingly harmless comments that made them doubt themselves. Building a self-image is a delicate process, constantly influenced by the language of others. It is common for a person to see themselves negatively simply because someone they care about spoke badly about them repeatedly. Internal dialogue, what we say to ourselves silently, is often a direct reflection of what we have heard in the past. If we have been praised, we tend to believe in our worth. If we have been despised, we struggle with self-deprecation. This is where words take on an almost invisible but profoundly powerful character. They build the inner voice with which we interact every day. This voice can be a friend or a tormentor. In many cases, the root of personal insecurity lies in words or phrases heard in childhood or adolescence. When left unhealed, these verbal memories become limiting beliefs, restricting our dreams and choices. Therefore, the process of self-knowledge also involves reviewing the words we believe about ourselves. Restructuring these internal messages is an essential part of emotional maturity. Psychologists often work with reframing techniques, helping patients replace self-deprecating thoughts with truer and kinder statements. It is a work of reconstructing the internal narrative. Language has the power to liberate. When we give ourselves the right to describe ourselves generously, recognizing virtues, achievements, and potential, we pave the way for a healthier and more confident identity. Likewise, learning to defend ourselves verbally, setting limits, and responding to unfair words is an act of Not everything we hear should be absorbed. Some words need to be returned to the sender. It is also important to reflect on the words we direct to others. We may be helping to build identities or contributing to someone doubting themselves without realizing the power of what we say. Taking care of the language we use when speaking to ourselves and others is a daily exercise in awareness. It is a process of relearning, where we choose to cultivate words that affirm the life, dignity, and value of each human being. Therefore, language does indeed have the power to shape or deform personal identity. When used with intention and empathy, it becomes a tool for healing, affirmation, and transformation. When misused, it can silence, shame, and destroy. The choice, once again, is on the tip of the tongue. Language in love, relationships, construction, or ruin. In addition to formal feedback, daily work is full of verbal interactions that impact the organizational climate. Compliments, thanks, and words of encouragement strengthen interpersonal bonds. Communication at work also requires sensitivity to cultural and personal differences. What is considered acceptable in one context may be offensive in another. Knowing how to adapt language is a valuable skill. conflict situations are inevitable, but the way they are resolved depends directly on communication. Using words to express feelings, needs, and limits without aggression contributes to conciliation. Difficult conversations, such as layoffs or job changes, should be conducted with care and empathy. Poorly chosen words in these situations can cause trauma and harm the company's reputation. The ideal work environment is one where words are an instrument of inclusion and appreciation. Prejudiced language, offensive jokes, or discriminatory comments are forms of violence that destroy organizational culture. Technology also influences communication at work. Written messages, emails, and chats are channels that require extra attention to avoid misunderstandings or misinterpretations. The tone and choice of words in digital messages must be clear and respectful, since the absence of body language can make it difficult to understand the context and emotions. Training in assertive communication and emotional intelligence is an investment that benefits the entire organization, promoting a healthier and more productive work environment. Leaders who encourage sincere expression, open dialogue, and active listening create resilient teams, capable of facing challenges with creativity and cooperation. The appreciation of words in the professional environment is a differential that directly impacts the quality of services, talent retention, and the company's image in the market. Therefore, in the corporate world, language can be the tool that builds careers or destroys dreams. Using it wisely is an art that requires attention, respect, and empathy. Correct communication is the foundation of collective success. The role of language in education. Shaping minds and hearts. Education is the privileged field where language exerts its most transformative power. Through communication, teachers transmit not only knowledge, but also values, culture, and ways of thinking. Words of encouragement and recognition can spark students' interest and self-stimulating learning and personal development. You can do it can be the push students need to persist. On the other hand, excessive criticism, unfavorable comparisons, and demotivating words tend to create blocks, insecurities, and even school dropout. Pedagogical language needs to be carefully used so as not to become a barrier. The teacher, as a mediator of knowledge, must be aware of the power his or her words have in the formation of critical and empathetic citizens. The choice of vocabulary and the tone used influence the way students receive the message. Teaching is not just about passing on content, but about inspiring a love of knowledge. The language used in the classroom can transform difficult subjects into fascinating adventures or insurmountable obstacles. The dialogue between teacher and student must be open and respectful, valuing questions, doubts, and opinions. Words that promote respect and active listening create a safe environment for intellectual development. Furthermore, the role of language in education goes beyond the school. Parents, family members, and the community participate in this process, reinforcing or weakening the student's motivation with their own words. Emotional education, increasingly valued, also depends on words to teach how to deal with feelings, conflicts, and interpersonal relationships. Talking about emotions helps to form balanced minds. Language is also a tool to deconstruct prejudices and promote educational discourse must be inclusive, respecting and valuing cultural, social, and individual differences. In any loving relationship, communication is the guiding thread that keeps hearts connected. Words are the means by which feelings are expressed, boundaries are defined, and bonds are strengthened or destroyed. At the beginning of a relationship, the use of language is charged with sweetness. Compliments, words of admiration, and expressions of affection create an environment of emotional security. This phase is marked by verbal enchantment. Over time, however, Familiarity can lead to carelessness. Dry phrases, harsh responses, and verbal inattention begin to wear down what was carefully built at the beginning of the relationship. Couples who maintain the habit of communicating with kindness and clarity tend to have longer-lasting relationships. Saying thank you, forgive me, I'm here for you makes a difference, even in the simplest moments of everyday life. On the other hand, constant criticism, accusations, sarcasm, and comparisons are forms of verbal violence that erode mutual respect. Saying you never do anything right can be more destructive than silence. It is important to remember that, in an argument, the problem is not the conflict itself, but how it is handled. Speaking respectfully, even when disagreeing, is essential to prevent the dialogue from becoming a battle of egos. Some words can hurt more than any action. In moments of anger, thoughtless phrases like, "I regret being with you," or "You are a burden in my life," leave marks that are difficult to erase. Even with later forgiveness, the use of non-violent language is a skill that can be learned and developed. It involves talking about feelings and needs without attacking or blaming the other person. It is communication with empathy. Words also serve as a thermometer for the relationship. The lack of dialogue, or its replacement by irony or monosyllables, can be a sign that something needs to be reviewed urgently. Affectionate nicknames, declarations of love, and sincere compliments never lose their value, even after years of living together. Small words of affection keep the flame of the emotional bond alive. Care with language should also extend to conversations about sensitive subjects, such as sexuality, finances, or expectations. Talking about these topics with maturity strengthens intimacy and partnership. Apologizing when you make a mistake, without beating around the bush or making excuses, is an act of courage and love. The language of sincere repentance can restore relationships on the brink of breaking up. In the same way, verbal forgiveness is liberating. Saying, "I forgive you," and not just insinuating it, closes cycles and heals wounds. The spoken word has a much more powerful psychological effect than silent forgiveness. Healthy relationships are nurtured daily with words of encouragement, active listening, and intentional declarations of affection. Love is also about communicating, speaking, listening, and understanding. Thus, in romantic relationships, language can be the bridge that unites or the blade that separates. With it, we build homes, dreams, and stories. Or, with carelessness, we can destroy everything. Love is also about choosing our words carefully. Language in the workplace, power, respect, and conflict. In the professional environment, communication plays a fundamental role in team development, productivity, and the organizational climate. Words, when used responsibly, strengthen relationships and promote positive results. A leader who masters the art of assertive communication inspires trust and motivates his team. Clear, transparent, and respectful words create an environment conducive to open dialogue and collaboration. On the other hand, aggressive language, an authoritarian tone, and destructive criticism generate fear and employees who constantly feel undervalued tend to lose engagement and commitment. Feedback, when offered in a balanced way, is a powerful tool for professional growth. Constructive criticism should be accompanied by suggestions and recognition, so that it is perceived as an opportunity and not a threat. Active methodologies that encourage student leadership depend on clear and motivating communication. Teachers who know how to use words to encourage critical thinking contribute to the development of conscious citizens. Speaking and writing are essential skills that are developed at school, and encouraging verbal and written expression opens doors to academic and professional success. When assessment is done with careful choice of words, it can be a moment of learning and growth, and not just of judgment or punishment. Respecting students' linguistic diversity, including regional and cultural variations, is essential to valuing their identities and strengthening self-esteem. A teacher's word can be the seed that generates great changes in students' lives. Quality education is one that recognizes the transformative power of language. In short, language in education is an instrument of life, capable of opening horizons, building dreams, and forming complete human beings. Its conscious use is vital for education to fulfill its true role. So, did you realize how powerful what comes out of our mouths is? The tongue can be a seed that plants life, love, and hope, or it can be a blade that hurts and destroys. The choice lies in our words, in the care we take when speaking, to ourselves and to others. If this video touched you in any way, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with those who need to hear this message today and help spread this transformative force. Before you go, don't forget to like our video to support our work. Subscribe to the channel to be part of this community that values the power of words. And keep an eye on the videos that are appearing here on the screen. There is a lot of special content waiting for you. Thank you for being here. And until the next video.